All right. Well, welcome. My name is Tim Benson with OmahaBound. I'm here to talk about comic book binding with our guest Greg. And Greg, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. I will let you do that. But this is the first in hopefully a series of just conversations with people who have been binding their comic collections to talk about some of your history with the hobby and your favorite pieces, and then anything that comes up along the way. So, Greg, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, I noticed on the when you started recording the intro, you didn't ask about my last name. So I was like, I wonder if he's gonna take a shot at it, and be like, nope, we're gonna pass it off. Awesome. So my name's Greg Matiasevich. In sort of relation to what we're going to be talking about, I guess the big thing is that I write a column for Multiversity Comics called Shelfbound, which is about getting your comics out of the long boxes and onto the bookshelves. So it's obviously a comic binding column. It's something I've been sort of fretting to do for a couple of years. People are like, you should do something with that. Yeah, I'm getting around to it. And back in October, September, I was like, you know what? Now's the time. So it's a monthly column. We had sort of 3 weekly installments of like, here's what binding is, here's a primer on sort of how to do it, here's some of the things you can do, and then every month after that, knock on, sort of spotlight a bind that that I was interested in, either for content reason or for a particular binding trick. So I showcased Leave It to Chance 2 months ago, I think, and I had the Image oversized hardcovers bound, but also had sleeves put in to hold the 2 regular sized issues that weren't collected in those hardcovers.
Okay.
So the cool thing about that is, just immediately go off in a slight tangent, is that the binder knew ahead of time to put in spacers on the spine, so that having an extra 64 pages of content inside the book for years and years wouldn't like mess up the spine and the integrity of the book. So I thought that was an interesting enough little thing to be like, hey, this is something binders can do if you ask them something to sort of report to. So it's a kind of an ongoing exploration of my long boxes, my shelves, but also trying to sort of showcase kind of what I like about binding.
Cool. You bring up a good point about the binder knowing that. So, if you're okay saying, who was the binder who helped you with that?
So I use Herring and Robinson.
Yeah.
It's interesting. They were the first ones I used. So I'm based in Baltimore, and they are based in California.
Frisco.
But I still consider them a local bindery because I have a large amount of family that lives within about half hour of them. So I've actually been there a couple of times. I've met Jim and Joel a couple of times. Wonderful guys. I've been to the place. They've shown me around and like, here's how we do this and here's how we do that. I've seen like the glue pot that has like 15 years worth of excess glue from when they'll like glue stuff and then wipe it on the thing. It's a big small size sort of binderies are interesting to use because they can tend to be a little more responsive. And for things like that, like I basically presented the idea to them. I was like, look, I want to have a bind of this large, material. Is there any way I think I presented it to them as like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to bind those issues in and the size difference being like too much for me to kind of sort of wrap my head around or have it just be sort of unwieldy. And they're like, well, we can do sleeves. You've only got 2 issues. And he's like, if we do that, then we'll essentially sort of stick extra pages where those would sort of account for them sort of sheet wise and then just cut those sheets to about 2 inches
Yep.
or something to make the little spacers and stuff. And I was like, yes,
Yep.
let's do that.
Yeah, binder. It's called build-up paper. It's perforated on the inside, and we used to use it for books with various sizes. So, like, if one book was this tall and the next was this tall, you put build-up in there so that when the book got pressed, it didn't crease the one that was too big. So, yeah, I think that's the cool thing about working with a binder or with somebody with some experience. And yeah, H&R is fantastic. I don't use them a ton because I've got somebody local, like truly like local, and then they can only do a certain types of binding. So it just limits how many projects we can send to them. But their stamping is beautiful, and their cover material, they have a lot more in stock, like air stocks and linens and things like that. And I like to do half binds or quarter binds with them. So.
Mm-hmm. The thing that you do that they don't is the art on cover stuff.
Yep.
That I love, but I just can't bring myself to sort of pull the trigger on those because I change my mind like too much about stuff. Like I'm way too nitpicky. So with them, at least so far, like I've gone with them, and then I just make dust jackets. I've got some library supply, like the plastic things, and I just print out a little something and put it there. And then if I like it, great. If not, I can just change it. I guess I can do that with a book that has a art on cover, but they're great. I've pretty much used them exclusively, but there are other people, the company included, that are doing really good work and stuff that I would like
Yeah.
Did I even close to answer your question?
I think so. I forgot the question, so it doesn't matter.
Basically,
yeah. So you're doing Multiversity. I am guilty of like a comic creator that doesn't read comics. I'm usually so busy enough doing the work that I don't get to spend a lot of time in the hobby. So like all the podcasts, all the YouTube channels, all the videos that people are doing about how to bind and all of that. Like I wish I could consume more of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it really comes down to do the work or read about the work. And for a long time, I was the one reading about it, and then made the jump into doing it. And I miss out on so many great things like what, it sounds like your panel or your discussion, your posts are covering. So I've seen a couple of videos recently on how to bind it yourself. And I have not had the heart to watch them, but I've seen some of the results, and those guys are doing some really fantastic work and learning a skill on their own. So it's been fun to see that. So
yeah, maybe someday I'd kind of like to maybe do that, but then I'm like, wait, I've got professionals at the ready to do my stuff. They're like, oh, no, not yet. Send stuff off.
Yeah, it's a matter of how much time you have in your day, how many hobbies you can consume and do them well. So I'm too scattered to really dig into the actual like hands-on process. So we do a lot of prep. We do a lot of work to the material that the binder could do.
Mm-hmm.
But after working at the bindery for so long and seeing exactly what we were doing and learning how to do that, I've found that I can trust binders to do certain things and trust myself to do others. And so if I've got to write instructions for the bindery, and it's something I could do myself, I do it. Just because there's too much risk for error on them understanding the instructions, and they don't have time for that. They need to get to work. So we do a mix of how much work we do and how much we hand off to them. So cool. So tell me, we'll do a couple quick questions, and then we're going to jump into your current shelf trophy piece, and I know it will change. We all have a new favorite eventually, so I know this will change. I won't hold you to it in a couple of years, but so tell me, what, if you remember, what was the first book you had bound?
I know I sent more than one book off bound, so I'm trying to think of what I sent in the first. I think the first batch I sent, I want to say 4 books. Mark Waid's Flash, a volume of that, 2 volumes of Matt Wagner's Grendel, the Kamiko stuff. I had which had wraparound covers, so I had those flipped, and then some of those had like a fold out. So I had some. So I was experimenting with like the the turning the covers around to have them be sort of spreads in the book, and then also some fold outs, like experimenting with that.
Yeah.
And, hey, I want to try something. That might have been it.
Cool. I mean,
I think that's it. Yeah.
that's an ambitious first project.
Yeah.
So
I'd been reading the boards for a couple of years
yeah.
before I did that. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. Let's jump on in. So
Cool. All right. What's your current project?
well, I actually hadn't sent anything to Aaron and Robinson for been like 2 years or something. I got caught up in work and things, and thankfully H&R offer gift certificates. So I'd had like a 2 year cycle of like birthday, Christmas gift certificates that had been sort of building up.
Yeah.
And I'd done enough binding before that my family and stuff were like, you'll get to it, just and then we find ourselves with extra time on our hands, and I emailed them and heard that they were still working, and I was like, I think I'll send them some stuff. So I sent them about like 20 books
Wow.
worth of stuff, like binds and stuff. So that was, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. 4 volumes of Astro City, a Dark Horse Presents, to finish that off, an Aliens bind, a Predator bind, an Aliens versus Predator versus whoever. That was 2 volumes. A couple of oversized collections, like first graphic novels, so like the P. Craig Russell, Elric stuff, some Marvel graphic novel, the old oversized things, couple of collections of those, and a couple of test and some other things, but then a couple of test binds of heavy metal.
Yeah.
I sent 2 volumes, basically a year's worth of heavy metal, to test out the Smythe sew on them, because a lot of those things are like full bleed right to the middle.
Yep.
Where I'm like, man, I don't want to lose any of this. But obviously Smythe sew is an upcharge, as it should be. Like, that is labor intensive and stuff. I was like, well, I'm thinking of like 10 or 12 books of this. So if I can be happy with the let me see what the Smythe sew is like, because I had some Epic Illustrated bound, and I feel like they're kind of the same type of book. I had those done as a regular oversew. I was like, okay, I'm pretty happy with this, but let me try out the Smythe, because if it really works, I guess it will, I'll go with that over time, because some of those spreads and stuff, you're just like, so if you'd asked me this question like 3 months ago, I would have been that I haven't said anything.
Nothing.
But yeah, I had the gift card money building up, and I was like, you know what, it's time to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
On those.
Now, does H&R do Smythe sew, or are they hand sewing everything?
So
I don't need you to reveal a secret if they've
no,
got.
no, no, no,
I know their
I,
site, they always listed as hand sew upcharge.
Okay, so here's the thing. I wasn't sure there was a real difference.
Okay.
Like I thought hand sew and smythe sew were synonymous.
Oh, okay.
Am
Um,
I
well, I
crazy?
can talk about it, but I don't want to burst any bubbles. So
No, but
smythe sew and hand sew are different.
okay.
But and so smythe sew is essentially a sewing machine
Hmm.
version of hand sewing something.
Ah,
So there is a big machine with like spools of thread, looks just like a sewing machine, and it's
mhm.
punching holes through the crease. Hand sewing is you would literally by hand punch
Yeah.
holes through the crease and then by hand sew it. Um, the difference is, or I mean, there's obviously a difference, but one of the big differences for me is when you're hand sewing, you can adjust the tightness from one issue to the next.
Mm.
So if you have books of different style, so if you had we'll talk about Astro City. If you were binding some of those Dark Ages books on highly glossy paper with
Mhm.
some of the previous books that
Mhm.
were a little more, not glossy, you would want to change the level of tightness you're sewing when you transition from one type to the other. Versus
Mm.
smythe sew, it's a machine. It's not going to make an adjustment mid book, and there's some natural, um, I guess I don't want to say gutter loss, but there's some natural loss by using the machine. Very minimal, but so yeah, hand sew is always um, nice because the person there's a lot of craft involved in it, and they can make adjustments as they go. But even within hand sewing, every binder I've ever used hand sews differently.
Mhm.
Um,
Of course.
so I believe H&R hand sews like by hand.
Yeah.
Houchin can do both, but they don't like to hand sew them.
Yeah.
Smythe sew is their version, and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But I've asked them to hand sew books before, and obviously when I worked there, um, I would have different people hand sew based on the book. So I knew their styles even. So I knew that this person could probably handle this project because of X, Y, and Z, but I know this other person needs to do this one. So it was even within one company. I was giving different projects to different people. So yeah, hand sewing is like a whole topic for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I believe H&R does it by hand, and it's beautiful. And heavy metal is a perfect choice for hand sew. So
Yeah. But yeah. I as soon as I said that, of course, I remembered seeing the not the machine, but the apparatus. I remember seeing Jim there, literally, like doing the sew and so. So it is. So they are hand sewn, and he's great. Doesn't I mean he'll do it, but he's like, oh man, that's a bit of a
yeah,
it's work. It's but yeah, but I think that's what I've sent them in the last couple of weeks. So that's sort of what I have out in the hopper. And then as soon as as soon as those boxes go, I'm looking around. I was like, oh wait, I forgot to do that. Oh, okay. So now I'm pulling. So it's again time on our hands. It's the hamster's running.
yep,
Just
yeah.
like
A lot of people are going through their collections right now. So myself included. I'm working on my own projects as well as everybody else's that we've had. So yeah, cool. Well, let's dive into. I asked you to pick one book that you were, I don't know what I said, proudest of, happiest about, but you picked one book to talk about. So let's jump in.
So this is a book that came early on in my binding. So I think I sent that first batch, let's say 2012, 2013, maybe. Let's say 2012. This one I put together in 2014, but it was sort of the first book that kind of opened up a new line of thinking for me in
Okay.
terms of binds. So this is a collection of works from Greg Rucka and Steve Lieber. So it's like an anthology I put together that I called Tarnished but Unafraid. And it is, like I said, a collection of their work. And it's probably the first book that I did that was not like a straight kind of getting something out of the long box onto the shelf, sort of like, I'm going to bind this run, or I'm going to bind, Mark Waid Flash. Or it started off, Rucka did a series for Top Cow that lasted 4 issues called The Felon. It was a series centered around a female criminal and the FBI agent pursuing her. So it fit well within his wheelhouse of, strong female protagonist, grounded crime.
Yeah.
But the thing, like, you're like, of course it's a Greg Rucka book. The problem is it came out through Top Cow, and it was not something that the Top Cow audience of that time was really sort of into. So they only did 4 issues, and there was such a drop off. The 4th issue was printed in black and white.
Oh.
Or like, not for stylistic reasons. It's like, oh, it's a black and white. They're like, nope, we're gonna pull the plug on the color to get you to 4, just so we can somehow, financially manage this, and then that's it. So it was Greg Rucka and actually Matthew Clark, who they would either go on to work together again on Superman, or they'd work on Superman previously, and this is sort of the next thing. Anyway, so I had these 4 issues in my long box. I was like, I'd really like to have these more accessible than in the back of, a long box, but like, I didn't want to bind 4 issues. I mean, I guess technically you can do that, right?
Yeah. I've got a shelf full of them.
Yeah. But I'm like, no, what else can I put in? And so I'm like, okay, well, building on this sort of theme of like, okay, a Rucka book, I was like, oh, I'd like to use whiteout. And then, Stumptown was in its heyday at the time, or sort of its first heyday back then. So like, I've got, I'm also not notorious, but let's say a notorious double dipper. So I will buy the singles because I like to support, I like to sort of read the comics and support the comics at the time. But then oversized hardcovers, hello, it's like, ooh, shiny. So I had collections of stuff, but then I had these single issues, floating around. So I was like, okay, let me put these 2 together. And so I started building it with whiteout, and then Stumptown, and then I'm like, okay, well, there's this Rucka Lieber sort of connection. But then Steve Lieber did a miniseries, an Image miniseries with Jeff Parker called Underground. Like, okay, well, then that makes it, if I put something in there that doesn't have any Rucka to it, then that kind of evens out the thing. Then it is a Lieber and Rucka anthology rather than just Greg Rucka anthology, which is fine, great, but I really respect both creators. I wanted to give them kind of what they do. So I put this thing together, and then I was looking online, and I found a nice essay that Rucka did about, like, why he writes strong female protagonists. And then I found a really good interview with Steve Lieber going into like process and stuff, and like talking about whiteout and pre-whiteout and post-whiteout and stuff. I was like, okay, cool. So I printed those out, got them, formatted them, printed them out, and I was like, I was going to put that in the book as well, because I was like, well, one, the internet things are there until they're not, so it would be nice to give this some permanence. I guess in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, if I were going, I guess like publisher, like if I were going to publish this, obviously I'm not, but like, what would I do? It's like, well, I'd want to see this, I'd want to see this, I'd want back matter, I want, like all these things. So this was the first book that I did that, was that type of, date myself, I would say like making a mixtape, but like mixtape, playlist, that sort of thing. Like you start with an idea, you start with a kernel. You're like, okay, I got to use, these 2 songs. What can I build, from there? And so you're looking at like pacing. You're looking at, if I'm going to sit down and read this thing all the way through, which, probably not for something that big, but like, you know, do you go chronologically? Do you go, you know, thematically? And it's a whole bunch of rabbit holes you can fall down quite easily. But yeah, so but even like putting this thing together, so I had so I had those 4 issues of Felon, and I'm like, okay, I want to put in Whiteout. I only had the trades for Whiteout, right? Like, and these weren't the definitive. They weren't like the definitive editions that we have now, which are beautifully like remastered and everything. They're super sharp, but they're 6x9, right? Like they're sort of little smaller things. So I just had these trades, but I was like, man, I really want the covers. I want the original covers. So of course I have the material already, and I'm still looking online to try and find the, you know, the single issues, because the, at least for the first mini, you had like a cover by Frank Miller, you know, a cover by Matt Wagner, Dave Gibbons. I was like, yeah, I want those in there. So I priced it out, and I was like, yeah, all right, what the hell, why not? We'll just do that. So, you know, even then, I'm still like trying to make more work for myself, but it's fun to do that in a way. I mean, it doesn't sound fun when you're explaining it to people. You know, they sort of give you a look of like, but you already have it. Why are you going? It's like, yeah, but I get the cover with the thing, and like, okay, that's nice.
Yeah,
but
putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, yeah, it's like you're sort of drawing the picture and putting the puzzle together at the same time, which is interesting phenomenon. So I put this thing together, I got it, and I was really happy with it, and it begat other things. And then the second part of that is I then took it to HeroesCon 2013. 2013? Yeah, let's say 2013. Adjust the math on the other dates just to make this all work. Because Greg Rucka was there, Steve Lieber was there, Matthew Southworth was there, who'd done the first part of Stumptown, and like a couple other people were there. So, you know, I showed it to Greg, and he signed it, and then I showed it to, you know, Steve Lieber, and he was like, ooh, he signed it. And of course, artists signed by doing drawings, and then the no pun intended, the snowball effect of like having one artist do it and then show it to another. There's a like a one-upsmanship. You're like, well, I gotta look up my game. So I guess I'm gonna try and show you the result of this, because I'm super happy with it. I hope this comes across.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So originally it was like the Lieber thing down in the bottom. The Southworth image, which is like the largest there of decks, that was last. But just over the course of like a weekend, to have it just, you know, it being one, a conversation piece, two, you know, you show this to an artist or a creator, and you're like, look, I really enjoyed your work enough to like put it together. And I never give it to somebody with the intention of like, I need you to, you know, do a full-on sketch in this thing. I'm like, look, I just wanted to show this to you, tell you I appreciate the work. Whatever you feel motivated to do, like that's, you know, that's cool. And everyone's been really gracious about this and other things. So this, in my own sort of personal finding history, this was the book that kind of took me in, you know, a new direction, sort of thinking wise. Then also was one of the first that really helped make a particular convention experience that much more interesting, because you know, we were there for a couple of days and people kept seeing it, and so it kind of got, and because the people who were involved were also sort of talking to each other, like word got around. Like I didn't get to Southworth until like the second day, so he'd already heard about. It's like, oh, you're the guy with the book. Let me see the book. And it's, oh, I was like, yes, I am the guy.
I'm the guy. Yeah,
I'm the guy. And so like, and everyone's super nice, and it really helps bring out just, the fact that comics people are really, really nice and generous and just good people, and it makes me feel good to do something that makes them feel that their work is appreciated, because sitting alone in your studio or whatever, you can probably sometimes not sort of get the vibe from your readership that you should. So so this was helpful in that. So yeah, we're going on 7 years now, I guess, since I did this. I do have other books that I am proud of, but this one has a kind of a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the long and winding road story for.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Yeah, especially being able to, I mean, the book itself sounds like a cool adventure putting it together. And yeah, a lot of us have done that. It's like, I own all these books and I'm going to go buy them again so that I can bind them in this other way, or include this thing,
Right.
or, this one had a variant cover. That rabbit hole that you fell down is the same one that I fell down, which led me to publishing. That what would this book include? What's the back matter? What's the special stuff? Like that and approach to it is what led me to creating things like the Wretch Omnibus, and oh, there it is. And then working with kind of the things we're doing now, like working with creators directly and creating a not just special edition, but limited and numbered and exclusive to 10. So I think about like the mind management book that we put out a couple of years ago. We used Matt Kint's actual comics to bind these books, and then it's like, okay, what else can we put in it? Like, oh, well, there's these stories in Dark Horse Presents. Well, I don't want to bind those. I just want the mind management stories.
Right.
I happen to have the permission of the creator, so I can do whatever I want. So we produced a one-shot of just those stories. And we had to do that because we needed to sew the book. So we needed it to be a comic, not a trade. So all of those things that lead to this like perfect book, and then to have the creator see it is a nice addition. So
yeah, it's interesting, the little subculture within the subculture of comic creators who are into this. So obviously you've connected with a few of them, Matt Kent, Cullen Bunn, and so on. The mind management thing, really, really, really quick. I have a bind of mind management, and I included those stories because I was able to get them and scan them and have them print them out on, I guess, 11 by 17 paper and cut it down so they had a signature, because I had those books hand sewn. I know the difference. Because Kent, because he's an absolute madman,
right
has
right
in the spine, and you're like, I'm not going to lose that. Like, I can't. There's no point in doing it if you're going to lose, part of the texture. So I do remember specifically in like Photoshop trying to figure out the layout of the pages so that when you folded the signature, or you made a thing out of the thing, the pages would fall correctly. Right? Because that was a particular pain to do that. But when it came out correctly, I was like,
I used to just take scrap paper and literally fold it into a book and then write the page numbers on them, and then take the pages out and be like, okay, I need page 1 and 7. And because I could never figure out, there's a mathematical way to do it, but I was too lazy to figure it out.
There is. And in my day job, I work at the government publishing office as a proofreader. I don't work down in bindery, but I had to do a little stint down in bindery to be a back somebody. And so I was in press revise. So the guy that was down there, sort of who I was shadowing, he did try to teach me what the math was for that. He's like, okay, here's your sheet, this to this, this. And I'm like, okay, this. Okay, great. Now you do it. What'd you do? Like it just
Yep.
didn't quite sink in. But for the mind management stuff, for that thing, I made it work, and yeah, I'm real proud of those. Real proud of
Yeah.
those. But the whole like, oh, we have to include this stuff, but in order to have the hand sewing, it's got to be in the signature. Most people will be like, well, I guess we're not going to have them, But
Yeah.
Russ will be like, nope, failure is not enough.
Yep.
So
Yeah, we produced the one shots, and nice. Now you can just import all those pages to InDesign, and it'll do the math for you. So I quit trying.
yeah, it's going to outsource that technology.
Yep,
That's what it's
outsourced to a
for.
program. So we saw the cool inside page. What's the spine
Oh,
on that look like? I know you titled it. Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's a real simple tarnished but unafraid, which I was actually a little worried about. That's a paraphrasing of a quote from Raymond Chandler. He's the one that had that like short essay that was sort of like a primer for detective fiction and stuff. And I liked that phrase in relation to the characters, sort of the lead characters, in that they're Rekka doesn't only just write strong female characters; they're all somebody who have some sort of, I guess, tarnish or some sort of like adversity sort of overcome, but the strength of their character is that they will do that. So I really like that phrase, but I was like, I don't know if it wasn't the actual phrase, but I sort of paraphrased it a little, and I was like, he may be like, that's sacrilege. He's like, I can't believe you do that, but he's like, no, it's great. Like,
yeah, that's close. Yeah.
So the reason I haven't done a like dust jacket for this is that because of all that art on the inside, you do the dust jacket, and you don't have to do it like this, but for a lot of time I thought that you had to like tuck in the sleeves of the just to back up a little bit, for the dust jackets for this, I would use library, like the plastic covers, where it's like a sheet of paper and then plastic around it, and then you wrap that around, and sort of the ends of the book would go into almost like the sleeves of the dust jacket to have it on, so that you could open it up and the dust jacket would stay on.
Yeah.
Thing. So I was like, well, if I do that, then that sleeve is gonna, in order for it to sort of hold, that sleeve has to come in like halfway up the cover of the book. I'm going to cover up like a big chunk of that, wonderful artwork. And I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So, so this has been unadorned, even though I've started doing jackets for other stuff. But if I were to do it now, I would probably keep it pretty the same. I may change the color a little bit. That's one of the things, having Joel at Robinson, they will, you can use more than one stamp color without getting charged for a separate thing, which is nice. As soon as they sort of told me that, or I plumbed onto that, then I was like, oh, okay, so I can have like yellow and white, or like red and white. And so I may gone back and like made the title yellow and then the names white down there, or to play with it a little bit. It gives me a little more variation without having to get into the like stamping. I mean it's stamping, but like the die stamps, or like the putting the company logo or some other things on it. So that's probably the only thing I would do differently now. But in terms of the book itself, I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, it's let's say 7 issues of Whiteouts, 12 issues of Stumptown, 4 issues of Felon, and 5 issues of Underground. So probably close.
Yeah, 28 plus your bonus.
Something like that, yeah. And I trimmed down some of that stuff as much as possible. But I mean, it's a sort of a hefty book, but I mean, it is pretty okay, except for that. Oh yeah, this is back in the day. I had spacer cardboard, not cardboard, but cardstock-ish in between each one of the main
Oh yeah.
sections, which is something I did maybe just for that book and never really again.
Yeah.
um, I mean, it's fine for this, but I was just like, no, I don't need it.
Yeah.
Um,
I've
but
used end sheet paper because it's nice to have those dividers, but
mhm,
you need something flexible so it doesn't stick up like that.
yeah,
So I've recently started buying my own end sheets. So I'll buy like a ream of like 50, 11 by 17 in a color for projects like mind management where we need a colored end sheet or something like that.
mhm,
And then I have leftovers. But I'll do like a blue end sheet and then blue divider pages.
yeah,
So it allows you to add those extra pages that kind of nicen up the book a little bit,
yeah,
especially that first and last page. So things like that.
yeah. But
Cool. Well,
this,
now,
yeah, came out really, really, really well. Obviously, I'm super happy with it and sort of where it
yeah,
stands in my history.
no, the book looks awesome and a great story behind the creation of it, and then being able to show it to the creators. Those are definitely highlights for me. Being able to show somebody something that you put all that work into, and when they take the time to do more than just thank you for that, and they really kind of go above and beyond, it makes that a pretty awesome memory. So
Just really, really quick. There's one other thing I thought about this whole thing, and then the binding and everything. Is it allows you to engage with this work in a way that you're not creating it, but you
yeah,
well, okay, so it's a little different for you, but because in some ways you sort of are creating stuff, but it's like another level of engagement with the work. It makes it personalizes your connection with this material in a way that isn't you're sort of more than a reader. And in some ways you're kind of you just have a different relationship with the work than even the creators in some way, because in order to do these type of books you have to kind of you have to sort of like get inside the work and sort of think about it and like, okay, how does this fit in with these other things? Where am I going to break this story? What else is going to go? What else complements this in a way that is active and really helps you sort of say, buy into your collection, but it personalizes the collection in a way that I have found very gratifying over
yeah,
the years and stuff. And you're not just sort of buying the stuff, reading it, and then putting it into a box, or buying it, reading it, and putting it on the shelf. It's an engagement with the work that I find is both educational and personally satisfying, and also a wonderful bridge between yourself and the creators. Because you can have this stuff you can show them, and then you can talk to them about, hey, when I was doing this, I saw this particular thing, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that was a real nightmare. Let me tell you about that, blah 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 blah. Or, ooh, great, thanks for knowing that or noticing that. You really worked hard to do this and this and this. So it really opens up comics in a particular way that I really wish everybody could experience in some way, shape, or form. It's made me appreciate all of this stuff more because it's given me a way to interact with it um, that I wouldn't normally be able to do because I'm not a publisher, I'm not a creator. But now I don't feel like I'm quite on the outside as much as like if that makes any sense.
yeah. No, I think it's yeah, getting inside the head of the creator. For me, it's different. If I'm doing one book, like we just launched Regression, which is a Danny Luckert, Cullen Bunn book that they put out. It's like body horror, but Cullen Bunn, the writer, did a lot of I guess work with like hypnotism and
Mhm.
things that because his dad was a show hypnotist. And so there's like all this stuff in the back that's like pamphlets from his dad's tours and photos of him on stage, and you can tell that a lot of like personal memory and personal reflection went into the book for Cullen. So for me, it was, how do I take that and translate it into the design of this book that we're going to create, this truly limited edition, like fan of all fans have this type of thing. So yeah, you've got to get inside of the whole project in a way that, I mean, even as the writer and the artist, they have an isolated view on it. What we're doing is, the writer, the artist, the editor, the publisher, and then the buyer. Like, how do the fans of this book, how do they view this book? And so how do I create content that satisfies all of them? It really becomes a challenge that gets me excited about the project. And at the end of it, I'm always happy. So it's fun. With the Regression, I created a business card for Cullen that's mimicked after one of his dad's old promos. And he's going to write messages to the people who buy the books on it. So we've got some like cool, I guess, hypnotism and regression therapy themed things we're going to add to the books. And over the course of the couple months after you buy the book, we're going to release like, hey, go do this to your book, and you'll have a surprise. So we're literally building surprises into the book. So it's been a lot of fun to get inside of that project like that. So it's been fun. So cool. Well, Greg, thank you for sharing that story and your kind of experience with binding. We like you said, some of us find we have some extra time on our hands, and so OmahaBound, we're trying to generate some more content and kind of share and connect with our fans and people involved in this hobby. Whether you work with us or not doesn't matter. It's like we're all a sub niche of a niche of a niche, and we want to be part of it. So thank you for joining. So
thank you for having me.
All right, thank you.